Hello, and we are here for a very special background discussion on what it means to play World of Darkness when you're at our table. I'm here with Kevin, obviously, because he's the veteran of most of these.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, out of 8, you weren't in one of them.
Yeah.
And you ran one of them. All right. So anyway.
More to come.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Anytime we do World of Darkness, whether it be Werewolf, Hunters Hunted, Hunter Reckoning, any of the other permutations, we haven't done much with Changeling. We've barely touched Vampire, and
we've stuck very closely to Werewolf mostly.
Yeah.
We've ventured into Hunters Hunted. I want to say only starting with the defunct Thursday night at Mike's.
Yeah, well, there was a Hunter Reckoning game
right.
that I barely remember that was spun off of a Vampire Dark Ages that was one shot, but I'm disregarding those because those were well before your time.
Yeah.
And there was no canon that, moved forward.
Mm.
The whole point of this video is to cover the sub-references and sub-references upon sub-references that we tend to layer in. And this is covering the combined lore of about 8 separate games and how they intertwine to our current situation.
Basically, we don't like to leave things moldering on the pile. We recycle.
There's a lot of recycling.
So we make a collected, shared world amongst all the games, because why not? And pull things mainly from the storyteller's standpoint.
Yep.
Sprinkling bits in an effort to probably save some cognitive space, as if you pull something out from elsewhere, you don't have to think up new stuff all the time.
And it's, callbacks are callbacks, shout-outs are shout-outs. I mean, it gives us a combined lore that makes everything a little deeper and gives a little more texture to things. All of this, what's funny is if we were running Exalted, it'd be way worse.
So,
anyway, all of our shared lore probably dates back to the first Werewolf game I ran for the collected crew back in the old days, which was what I fondly title as American Werewolf and Soul. And this was a game that I ran immediately after coming back from living abroad, so all of the game was tied up deeply in...
It was his grieving process.
It really was. It was all tied up in what it was like to live and, be an American in South Korea. And none of it was easy. And this one has the funny little anecdote of having run into the main Werewolf the Apocalypse line developer, Ethan Skemp, at Gen Con, and talking to him for a good 15-20 minutes about living in Seoul, where the air pollution was roughly equivalent of smoking 2 packs a day. It was the...
As you do.
As you do. The internet connectivity and access was the highest in the world at the time. I'm not sure of it now. And they were cloning wolves. And Skemp just kind of looked at me and goes, sometimes the games just write themselves. I mean, which honestly was a huge compliment. And thanks, Ethan. So,
because obviously Reuben knows he's watching.
So, In terms of lore that carries forward, what do you want to touch on?
I want to start. As the basis of the environment of South Korea itself, and I know we aren't going to go into actual things that happened in the game as much as things that were made canon, but the fact that my werewolf character, his instant reaction to just the air was chug down as much alcohol as you can and then pass out, immediately followed by Thrall of the Worm and murdering his way down a street.
Yeah. There was
as the first thing.
Literally the first session of everything.
So it was, well, that's not a canon thing, it's just the environment of South Korea as per the werewolf experience. From there, the main canon points are what? South Korea is the site of the apocalypse.
Yeah, this was something that I the original game was supposed to be setting up to either prevent or ride the wave into the final days. It was a real big question of which way it was going to go and what was going to happen with it. The game tragically, foundered and died before we got to that point, but it's going to happen. But with the air pollution, with the Weaver,
Dominance.
With all of that,
With the strip mining of a mountain.
yeah, I had some great pictures I brought back.
Paved rivers.
That was more of a Japan thing,
Okay.
but there's enough in there. I mean, if you watch the video for Gangnam Style, the girls are exercising on the river, and all of that's paved.
Yeah.
But having it be the essentially the final battleground tied into how I viewed the real reason the Stargazers pulled back from Western society. There was a reason they had to go home, and it was, the clock was ticking down. So, that's a big part of it. Not that it's really come up a lot since then.
No.
I mean, we do go back to that with the later game, but only, in there. We had the cloned wolves, which was something that Seoul National University was doing at the time, was cloning wolves. I combined that with the fact that the demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea is one of the largest untouched natural preserves in the world. So the one place that the wild actually comes back to in the area is filled with landmines.
Does a pretty good job of keeping humans out.
Yep.
At one point, there was a jaunt that led to Chernobyl after a nuclear meltdown in Japan.
Yep.
That had weird implications on how the nuclear destruction of Chernobyl weakened a lot of the man-made infrastructures, which led to a weird understanding between the Black Spiral dancers in the area and the actual, non-corrupted werewolves.
Yeah, the Silver Fang, pretty much Chernobyl had established for my game that the Black Spirals, and we'll get to this in a sec, the Black Spirals and the Silver Fangs understood that there was no point in fighting because, the Silver Fangs were going nuts anyway, and the Black Spirals were just taking advantage of the fact that the crypt beneath Chernobyl, the nuclear plant, and the area around Pripyat was a giant hive, and there was no coming back from it. So they had this weird brokered peace, which honestly should, offend and unnerve every single, proper werewolf player in existence. But that's the point. The apocalypse is here. There was one last... Oh, yeah, that was it. For my part, none of my games feature Pentex, because it's unnecessary. Pentex, as portrayed in the Splat books, is mustache-twirling evil on a cartoonish level. And it's unnecessary. I mean... The characters have better things to do than go out and nuke a Toys R Us or a
burn down a McDonald's.
Yeah, there's no purpose to it.
I mean, if you really wanted to, but it's not gonna have any.
Well, I mean, yeah, you bombed that McDonald's. There's 3 more, 6 blocks away.
Yeah. So Pentex has basically been deconstructed. And more nuanced entities were built out of its remains.
Well, that and the apocalypse came. Why? Because the werewolf tribes were too busy, boot fucking each other. I mean, the game is set with rivalry between every single faction, and every single faction is busy squirreling away their own level of power, and
nobody's working together. Everything's going
it's
hell in a handbasket.
Honestly, it's a sin of omission rather than a sin of commission.
Yeah,
I mean,
but so yeah, also recurring NPCs that show up. The golden retriever werewolf that Reuben made to just screw with everybody's head. Eyes of gold.
What color were his eyes anyway? Blue.
Yeah. Probably brown, to be honest.
I think they were established as being he was a blue-eyed golden retriever in Krynos form that nobody quite could deal with. Because the best part of it is everybody was unnerved, but nobody asked any questions.
Yeah, and nobody really... He was a GM Fiat, honestly.
He was honestly... he and Ronaldo were based on people that I gamed with over in Korea. So they were GM Fiat, yes, but they were also, if, creek rose and the levee held, a buddy of mine would show up out of the blue, I would hand him if Mike Blackwood ever made the trek from California or from Seoul, depending on where he was at the time, I would have handed him Eyes of Gold to just mess with the party anyway.
So anyway, those recurring characters, and I want to say the disastrous introduction to the Legendary Realm.
Legendary Realm was an interesting...
I think the biggest thing was the old woman who recurred. Because she's the weird old woman who would be able to mess with meta stuff in the game.
Yeah. Well, it's Legendary.
Yeah.
There was so much that was packed into the Legendary Realm. This was where the game died, mostly because...
flailing.
Well, yeah, the reality of it was one of the players was starting to go a little,
nuts,
off kilter, and it was his house we were playing at, so we decided to hop into something else right before he kind of lost his marbles. Anyway,
that kind of ties up.
Yeah, it does.
So,
but yeah, the Legendary Realm was it was almost too big of a concept to deal with for characters that were really heavily street level at the time. And, lessons learned. All right. Next one, honestly, would be Iron Wolves.
Okay, premise of this one are werewolf bikers, inspired largely by Reuben's viewing of Sons of Anarchy.
And also my time in, the time I've spent in the desert Southwest. They were somewhere outside of Barstow on the edge of the desert when the rage started to kick in.
No.
Okay.
This actually introduced the military organization Tannhauser, which has been Reuben's pet ever since.
Tannhauser, at the time, was just established to be a PMC, private military corporation, that was doing some really sketchy things. May or may not have been government directed. It's hard to say. It was, there were specific things they were doing. They were destroying cairns, which was the main hook for the characters. But what was special about Tannhauser?
They were actually delirium proof.
Yep.
The company hired exclusively from either kinfolk or people with high resolve.
Yep.
Which means high willpower. Which means that they could see a full-blown werewolf and not even flinch.
Yeah. In terms of the game, a normal mortal dealing with a werewolf in full Krynos or in Hispo, honestly, a werewolf of obvious werewolf origin tends to send a normal human into either catatonia or denial.
Or outright fleeing terror.
You get your willpower on a scale of 1 to 10. Most normal people having between 4 to 6 if they're lucky. If you get your willpower at 8 or higher, you don't flip out the same way. Or if you're a kinfolk, you're just used to this because this is your bloodline. And this is what Tannhauser specifically was dealing with because the supernatural was such a big problem, in the world of darkness.
Yeah. And it was, basically founded by...
Well, we'll get to Friedrich soon enough. That's the...
That's later.
Let's see. The next one, actually.
What else?
Well...
This actually introduced the way that stargazers are dealt with.
Yep. There were 3 of the player characters. There was Kevin's character, our buddy Rich's character, and our buddy Matt's character. And these 3 characters, Matt played the Stargazer, Rich played Get, and you played the Silver Fang.
Yep.
The Stargazer was essentially disowned by his entire tribe as far as they were generally concerned.
Because he didn't come home.
Yeah. At this point, Werewolf 20 / Werewolf Revised, which we were running at the time.
Yeah.
Werewolf Revised had all the Stargazers removing themselves from Western society and heading back to Asia / India / wherever the cairns are scattered because things have gotten so dire.
Mm.
And so, essentially, Stargazers at this point are almost not allowed in the West because they're readying for the final battle. And so Matt's character was just, he was a ridiculously powerful K-Lindo, expert that had no home, had no family, had no connections. He was just kind of lost and drifting.
Honestly, that was basically the whole group, because the Rich's character, who was a white supremacist biker, Get Fenris.
Oh. And AM radio host.
Yeah, he is also a radio celebrity. He established himself as basically embracing the Get Fenris tradition of being warlike and,
Purity.
Purity.
And his character, the character's persona on the radio was Reichstag Fire. i.e., the strike point that allows fascism to take root in the guise of safety. Yeah.
Yeah. You say his radio handle, but that was also his werewolf name.
Yeah.
This carried on to a future game.
Couple future
games.
Essentially, in our World of Darkness, Reichstag Fire is the Hannity, Beck, Limbaugh, Shapiro firebrand that gets everybody all charged up to fight the power and, shake the pillars of heaven against, non-fascist things.
Yeah, honestly, he gets all up in arms when a Chipotle comes into town.
Yeah.
That said, last was my character, who...
Do you remember your character's name? Because I could not think of it.
Oh, yes.
Was it Yuri?
No.
What?
Vasily. Romanov.
Well, Romanov's kind of a given.
Yeah. I played my werewolf out to be the last scion of the Tsar of Russia.
Oh.
And he was, the
Oh, don't dance around it. You took pure breed at 6, basically.
Yeah, he had pure breed at 6. He was a silver claw. He had true faith Gaia.
Mm-hmm.
He was meant to be the shining, glorious star of the werewolf nation and its future. And was absolutely the hardest thing to play that I have ever attempted.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you're in with it, there were so many chuckleheads.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the number of people we had in that game that had no idea what they were doing. We had this guy that had spent time in the LARPs and was just confused by half the things we were talking about.
We had a rotating cast of guest players.
It was less of a rotating cast and more of a... There were, 8 players in the beginning and 3 players when we got done.
Yeah. True.
Because that was... I just remembered there's a game we left off.
Oh, yeah?
Dr. Dan's Fishing Supplies.
Oh, right.
We'll get them.
That never got anywhere.
It was like one session an hour.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So
they'd more established the character of the Get a Fenris.
Oh no! See, the thing of it is, the fishing game.
Yeah.
Let's finish up one thing. It furthered the problem we have with Silent Striders.
Yeah. Okay, so in American Werewolf and Soul, we had a Silent Strider. In Iron Wolves, we had a Silent Strider, and they were all horribly inept.
Yeah.
And ineffective.
For some reason, Silent Striders, just nobody quite knew how to play them. I've tried...
Or anybody who attempts to play them just kind of flops.
Yeah.
I think Asim was probably the best.
Yeah, we'll get to Asim and his long-lived potential. Was there anything else with Iron
DC.
Wolf? Oh, yeah. Right.
Washington, D.C. It establishes the council of interested werewolf parties and their absolute...
Basically werewolf nations that are trying to manipulate human society. Because I had assumed that there were like half a dozen elder vampires that masqueraded as, proper Southern Democrat, blue dogs, manipulating society and just never venturing outside of their offices during the daylight. But the Werewolf Council...
It established two things primarily. Most of the tribes had representatives,
Yep.
and they're as ineffective at doing anything as Congress actually is.
Yeah. Again, this is the apocalypse, so your werewolves have brought the end times for a very specific reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, the council, the werewolves of the Iron Wolves ended up going to the council for help to try to deal with Tannhauser, and there was only one faction, only one camp, really, that was interested in actually trying to do something about it.
Yeah. The Silent Striders.
Yeah, I was trying to redeem the Silent Striders a little bit. The fact that it is a Middle Eastern, group that's sick of all the Western, factions being idiots, they
were more than willing to blow up a box truck in front of the
Tannhauser
building.
Don't forget what else they did, because there were a couple things they did that.
That's the thing I remember most.
No, because they also assassinated the president and a good portion of Congress in the process.
Oh,
because under the surface a little bit. No, because here's the thing. Under the surface a little bit, this was a game that was like 2012, 2014, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
But they specifically wiped out the line of succession. Hence, we have Roy Fitzhugh and Talon Adler in control of the U.S. government. We'll touch on Talon Adler in just a moment. You wanna talk briefly about the Tractor Dan Fish and Supply game?
This was the horribly conceived Bonar game, where everybody but me played a Bonar.
And don't forget, there was one Silent Strider.
And one Silent Strider.
It was set in a trailer park in
Florida.
And it was to try to sort of revive the American Werewolf and Soul game.
Didn't work.
Well,
it established the Tractor Dan Fish and Supply
and Frankie T.
Who was constantly told to get out.
Frankie T was a motivational white rapper. Think Kid Rock and Eminem only. Kid Rock and Vanilla Ice only trashier and South Florida.
I was thinking K-Fed. And
he would rap at high school assemblies
about not doing drugs.
Not doing drugs.
Yeah, it was.
And there was also Big Ed Lesnick, who burned down his third trailer making meth.
It was as trashy as you could possibly get, which was the overemphasis of the Bonar trope.
Yep. All right, let's pause this here and jump back after a brief break.